And let's see, no weird names in here. There we go. I made off.
Excellent.
And they're coming in. Hey.
Clearly.
Excellent. So good morning,
How are
everyone.
you?
My name is Anna Thompson. I am the moderator for this session. And I am very, very happy to introduce my colleague, Todd Conaway. When we were in the office together on campus back in the day, right? We used to sit really close to each other in our office. So I was really excited when they told me I was moderating this session. And Todd is going to be talking to us about presenting a bigger picture, including a historical analysis. And I will be moderating chat and things like that, but I will let Todd introduce himself also, and also communicate with you how he would like to discuss and have open communication during the presentation. And here's Todd.
Thanks, Anna. So thanks for being here. This is very exciting. I've done one other presentation over the last year through Zoom, and it's certainly a different world. I'm the kind of person who, physical space is greeting people at the door and, playing music and has really weird handouts like that I've made. And so I miss that piece of this puzzle. By way of like super quick introduction, I'm an instructional designer. I feel like I'm just really kind of a cheerleader for faculty's hopes and wants. I feel like on the best days, I'm somebody who can maybe inspire them to do something, and on my less favorite days, selfishly, I'm kind of putting out fires, as you probably do yourself at times. So I've been doing instructional design for 15 years here at the University of Washington for 5, and then at community college for 10 before that. Prior to that, I was a high school English teacher, and that's what I do, right? I mean, that's always what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I'm still wanting that, to be a teacher. I have found that whether it was middle school kids, or mostly I worked with high school juniors and seniors, I love any audience, right? Like I'm gonna just go after them and see where we can go. So I feel like these days my audience is, primarily faculty and small groups, one-on-one, and it's just what I love to do. So I feel very fortunate to do that. I want to take just 1 second here to kind of address the situation here with COVID, and take a moment just to give ourselves some breathing room. And I'll tell you 2 reasons. One is kind of my family, and the other is my work. I have 2 teenage daughters, or excuse me, 2 college-age daughters. One of them graduated from college last year, the other from high school. So the one that graduated from college, rather than graduating at Yankee Stadium, where NYU has graduated for like 100 years, we graduated our daughter here in our living room, right? Our younger daughter graduated from high school, so she didn't have a prom, she didn't have a high school graduation. We literally sat here again in our living room and watched it on TV. And while they're both incredibly resilient and amazing people, I know that it was really devastating to them to miss that piece of such a landmark event in your life. So I see, and I also see it the whole rest of the year. One now at Brooklyn Law School, and the other one who was so excited, our youngest daughter, who after graduating high school was super excited to go to the University of Glasgow, right? And go to Scotland and go to school. Thankfully, she went to Scotland for about 2.5 months, but returned for Christmas and never went back because of the UK variant. So, her first year in college. Going there was 2 years or 2 weeks quarantine in her dorm. And I hear these other stories around their life, their classes, and their interpretations of that. But also I want to just take a moment to address like the faculty I work with and the enormous struggle and effort and the challenge they've all risen to do the best they can in these strange times, and to really acknowledge that work. I think that giving ourselves an enormous amount of grace, or walking through this with the most compassion we can, is super important. So, and I say all that in the context of this session, which is about presenting information to people like you, right? So, as you probably have heard somewhere, sometime, it's not a bad thing to tell personal stories, to capture audiences, right? So I'm going to try in this remaining 43 minutes or whatever we got to really try and focus on the amazing amount of possibilities that exist today in the world of teaching and learning. And so that's kind of what I'm doing, where I'm coming from today. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to look at this presentation. What I would love to have happen today is that you ask questions anywhere in the presentation that you have them, whether you ask them in chat, whether you raise your hand, and hopefully Anna can spot you and stop me. I believe that questions kind of exist in time and space, and that's a really important element of the question in your head, that it's got all these connections. And it's at that moment in time where it's really an opportunity to answer it. And usually if one person is wondering something, so are other people. So I encourage you to ask questions during this. I'm not going to really save too much time at the end for that. I would rather just actually, I probably will. But I think that asking them in the context of what is being discussed is super important. So I would like you to do that if you feel so inclined. Fair enough. So the first thing I'm going to do here is, Anna, you have to make me a co-host or something. I can't share my screen, which could be a good thing.
There you go, Todd.
Thank you very much. All righty then. So here we go. So this is my presentation, right? I have been really lucky in my work to, as a teacher and as a presenter at conferences, to be the person who has to show things to people, right? Whether it's writing it on the board, or whether it's showing them a PowerPoint slide, or whether it's showing them something on a website, I'm that guy who gets to control that to some degree, right? So over the years, and I'm going to do a brief historical analysis in a moment, my presentation skills, I guess, have evolved from, or devolved from, definitely using things like PowerPoint and then Prezi and some other fancy ways of presenting information on a screen, to some other things. And I'm not going to go better or worse. I'm just going to show you the difference and some of the qualities that exist in different spaces. That I think have been really helpful to me. In a lot of ways, they kind of got me the job of being an instructional designer, because when they said, send us your resume, what I sent them was my work, right? Like, here's all the things I've done, and you can go see that. And I felt like that was, well, it got me the jobs, so that's good. So my presentation here basically is on a website, as you can plainly see. It has some qualities to it. It has the ability to move forwards and backwards in time, maybe not necessarily in terms of this presentation, but in terms of literally time. You can go back and look at courses I taught 10 years ago. You can go back and look at things I wrote 10 years ago. and you can go look at things I wrote a month ago. And yet it's all captured here, right on your screen, or this could be projected in a classroom on a screen. And you don't need to download it, right? I mean, that was a big leap back in the day. Remember when you had to send yourselves a PowerPoint or something? Let's see here. Sorry, didn't have the chat window open, so I couldn't see anything. Okay, so this is a little different. Like PowerPoint, you can add bulleted lists, you could add pictures, you could add videos, you can add almost anything. Drawback number one, if you don't have internet in the room you're presenting in, that creates a big challenge. If it's not really great internet, who knows? So always bring a backup, right? That's good advice for anything. You could probably recall the days when you would walk into a room, not only with the flash drive version of your presentation, but you'd also emailed it to yourself in case the USB drive didn't work, or vice versa. The internet didn't work, so you have to bring it on a PowerPoint or on a flash stick. So I'm going to present to you today from this space, and like I said, it has qualities that move forward and backward in time. It's linear in that way, but at the same time, it's kind of all over the place. Today, I'm going to focus mostly, let me draw this down a little bit, on some examples that I have used in the past, and ask you for a contribution to maybe some things you have seen that have worked. So first, what I would like to ask you to do in the chat, and this is not any kind of a effort to devalue any kind of presentation, but if you would, so you've all been to some of these presentations, in the chat, would you maybe enter the percentage of presentations that you've witnessed in this event that were either in PowerPoint or Google Slides, right? So, and I'm going to use those kind of interchangeably, right? So, you know, by and large, well, the beauty and amazing thing, right, of Google Docs or Slides was that it, instead of your presentation being a file, it became a URL, right? So it was on the web, and that, of course, we all know was just ridiculously amazing. Yeah, so and we still live in that land, right? We still live in the PowerPoint world, and we are in that. It's great, it works, we've seen it, it's done it. I'm gonna show you in my example here, like I actually have PowerPoint, of course, on this page too, right? So you can actually also put PowerPoint or similar into this space. So let me just give you a brief look at kind of my historical epiphany around 2008. So I don't know why it happened, but for a long time, I definitely, I guess, let me tell you a bit about myself. I feel like an artist, mostly. I'm not very good at art, but I feel like one. And I'm not very good at things that are linear. I prefer sort of wiggly, weird lines. And so there was probably something in my nature as a teacher, and for better or worse, and as obviously here as a presenter, that is kind of squiggly and weird. And PowerPoint often is more linear or straighter of a line than I suppose I would prefer. So when I realized that you could use the web to share information, I tried to sketch and draw things on it in a way that would allow me to present stuff that was not quite as linear. But in 2008, if you'll recall, this is just, you know, 2 years really after YouTube got going, your options for sharing something at a conference or in a class, you were literally you had to use pretty much a file, and that could live in Blackboard or that could be emailed to somebody. But by and large, you were still at that file level. When things like SlideShare came out, which is what you're looking at here with this digital personality thing, and YouTube, you could capture your screen, you could narrate a lecture. And back early on in SlideShare, it was so clunky and difficult to do, but you could actually narrate your PowerPoint presentation, and it was like pretty miraculous. You could send somebody a link to basically what we now know is like a screen capture of you talking through your PowerPoint. And that was just such an elevation to me from the file of bullet points and maybe some presenter notes, if those were included, as what we would call the lecture. And I know that we're hopefully quite past this, but I mean, in my work, I can't tell you early on how many times I saw a PowerPoint file called the lecture, right? It was literally like the item in Blackboard was, week 5 lecture, and all it was a PowerPoint file. And early on in, online learning, that was pretty rough on students, because really all your anecdotal information, the story you wrap around your lecture is the lecture. And you'll see here at the end that I actually think there's even more to it than just that. But for me, when I noticed that in SlideShare, you could like share this stuff, it really was amazing. And of course, my skill set was still back at bulleted lists. And I mean, that's where I lived in this space, and that's okay. But that's how I really started to realize that I might be able to share a presentation in a medium other than what I knew, which at that point was PowerPoint. So like I said, nobody's asking questions that I'm aware of. So if you got them, raise your hand or type them in the chat. I'm going to move on here. I have used this document before. These are not my ideas. These were from previous presentations. So of course, there are probably a lot of the ground is covered here. It is simply a Google Doc. And what I'm really interested in what has been the best way you've seen material presented, right? I'm going to show you here in a minute some ways that I've presented information, but I do think that there are a lot of ways to do it. I don't know if anybody has seen the new Prezi video tool. I remember when Prezi came out, it was like unbelievable. But the new video tool is pretty slick. It's got some ways to go with accessibility, I believe, but it actually it's a pretty unique tool. During conferences, of course, we have done the back channels with Twitter. We've done all kinds of, obviously, we can poll people, we can ask them questions, we can get down on our knees and beg them to interact with us, which I'll do again. If you have any questions, please let me know. The ways that we can interact during presentations is a huge part of this, right? As we'll see here at the end, I'm a huge fan of like physical objects. When I went to school to be a teacher, I learned that, visual aids, including PowerPoint, were super useful. So I brought all kinds of visual aids to class. Here it's a little challenging. I could show you my phone right here, where I'm actually doing office hours. Sounds weird, hardly anybody ever shows up, but I'm actually doing office hours for my job while I'm presenting. So I'm on another Zoom line right over here. I made a fancy sign that hopefully if they show up for the office hours, they'll come back later. So that's my handout. but there's a lot of new things that a person on a stage or in front of a classroom or in Zoom could share with other people. I'm sharing you like a website. That's so funny. Just as we speak, somebody shows up. So I'm going to hold my sign up here and see if they'll come back at 10. That was not planned. So I, one second. Trying to show them my sign. Okay. So okay, she says she can come back. Excellent. So as you're presenting, there are many ways to do things. You can give them lots of tools. This is not the end-all be-all list. As you can see, again, people have added all kinds of things. I encourage you, if you know other things, to add them to this list, right? So this is like what during the presentation works. Crayons, that works at tables. I've actually seen that work incredibly well with a bunch of college faculty. So what about the part, I used to joke that, you know, you can fit a URL in your luggage easier than you can fit a sheet of handouts, right? Not that a bunch of handouts aren't valuable, but it's pretty easy to share and take with you a URL, whereas the physical copy of that thing obviously is only accessible to you. And a URL allows you to take it with you or share it with somebody else. So after the presentation, what is your presentation's kind of like long-term capacity as a file, as a PowerPoint file, as a website, however you're delivering it, and what are the qualities that it has? I mean, if you just look at what's happened thus far, I've given you a website that can be commented on, and I'll show you that in a minute. But it also has a Google Doc that's embedded in it that any of you can, you know, go in there and type whatever you want, right? So there's all kinds of options for interaction here. Let me tell you this first before we, I'll share this in the, I know most of you or many of you have already seen this. I'm not a huge fan of giving people the presentation before the event, partly because I think I've watched people get ahead of the speaker in a way that seems like they're no longer with the speaker. And that kind of as a control freak, that always kind of freaks me out. So I'm going to share with you the URL at this point, since we've kind of been here and it looks like some of you are already in there. But I've given you a presentation that you actually can create yourself, right? Like a lot of this could be created by you, and ideally it is created by you. So
Todd, there's a comment in the chat from Whenellen.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, Ellen's comment there just about, I am a huge fan of physical objects that are connected to the content, loosely or very clearly, whatever it is. I think that if you think of like you're most often in most classes, you are listening, you know, you're in listening mode. Sometimes you're in talking mode, but the whole tactile part of the experience. My wife has owned a dance studio for 20 years and a choreographer, and I got to tell you that the physicality or the physical nature of learning is often left out of classrooms. I think you know, singing songs and clapping your hands to the rhythm. I mean, may not be the perfect example for, you know, the graduate level course, but there is some sense there is a part of that physical nature, much like emotional learning is also oftentimes left out. I think that it's important to touch stuff in our, as often as we can in delivering experiences to students. So yeah, I mean, I love that anybody bringing things and then they become artifacts, right? I mean, who knows who will ever go revisit this, but you know, my presentation here as it exists is something that you can 3 weeks from now come back and visit or send to somebody if you saw something that was interesting. Yeah, so the next thing is Padlet. If you have examples of presentations you've seen in the past that are shareable, that exist on a URL somewhere, add them, because I don't think that there's not a right way to do it. You know, I'm using WordPress as kind of the platform here, but there's all kinds of amazing web editors, and whether it's literally a video on YouTube can be a presentation, especially if like the person presenting says, and you can comment on this presentation and share your ideas in the comments below, you know, as long as you're open to that and directing people. That's another way that you can sell an idea. I'm selling the idea of kind of moving to a different place than maybe what we've traditionally done in presentations. And you can share that in an interactive way. So yeah, so please feel free to add, participate now or later in either the Google Doc or the Padlet that is here. So if there's no other comments or questions, I am going to come down here to just kind of share some examples that I've actually done in the past over probably the last 10 years or so. For better or worse, I haven't made a PowerPoint for a conference presentation in like 10 years. I've done it kind of like this with various elements, right? I began with it was literally replicating PowerPoint. It was just picture after picture after picture, and I would just kind of scroll through the pictures, right? Since then, I think I've advanced slightly. So I'm going to show you a couple of these that I've done. The first one I'm going to show you is a free WordPress site that was used over and over again because it was such a great idea. And it echoes some of the same things I just showed you a minute ago, right? Like it's got the embedded sort of slides, so you can see the slide version of the presentation. But essentially, and this is my show me your work motif, or I want to see what you're doing, or examples of what you're talking about. And websites, of course, are nothing but mostly just links and things, so you can go to those things. I was able to get a bunch of faculty to write a lot of stuff at a community college in Arizona. And that was really helpful because it was all public. So they were writing about teaching and learning, and they shared that on the thing called the internet. And so other people could see it. And soon we were interacting with other universities. Other universities started doing the same thing. And the idea behind that was super simple, right? Like, let's all write together and share our experiences. But for me, that led to some conference presentations. And so this is the site that I had created for that event, and it's evolved over the years. Of, you know, the banner has changed to fit the event, right? But by and large, it's the same darn thing that I've been using for a long time. More recently, and I think probably one of my favorite versions of this event is this presentation, and I did it a couple years back at an OLC event. But doesn't it look nice? I mean, if nothing else, it looks pretty, right? So you can click on playful printed material or frisky web formats or whatever, and you can go visit like some really interesting, to me, some really interesting ideas, right? I mean, yeah, you may not be into it, but I like made coloring books for faculty to have in front of them with that. Basically, it was the agenda and a bunch of information related to our event. And a lot of other kind of what I don't know, fun and unique things that I thought they were great. So this was that presentation, right? And I said, hi, my name's Todd Conaway. I'm interested in putting playback in PD, and here's some ideas I have, right? And we looked at all of those things. People asked questions, and then it was over. For those of you that happened to witness the Northwest eLearn event a couple years ago or last year, I tried a different version of this whole thing. This was my presentation, and whilst the live version was remarkably challenging, what I learned was that I could write basically a story about my presentation, and I did. And so, and this was a super tricky, this was a really tricky topic, right? I was like trying to place design principles or the elements of design inside learning experiences, right? So, yeah, you can read about this if you'd like. But this is the story, right? So you can see that like that would have been the first title slide. This was the second where I tried to explain something. This was the third slide. This was the fourth slide, fifth slide, right? And so I go through each of these topics and I explained it like this, right? So yeah, so that one I learned that rather than putting bulleted lists on a PowerPoint slide, I might literally write a story or write in paragraphs. It would be like almost my notes, but yeah, it would be like my lecture notes. And I put those notes kind of in between the slides, as it were, right? Any questions? Nobody has any questions? I'm gonna take a sip of coffee.
None in the chat right now.
I know.
Yeah, this is so great though. It's just, I was there at this presentation, it was a couple of years ago at our face-to-face conference in Bend, Oregon. And it was Todd, it was really exciting to see him present and demonstrate. He even brought show and tell items to them.
Yeah. So I mean, I typically will bring something there, and there's photos of that stuff in here. So so that's another space, right, to present in. You know, Twitter, if you think about Twitter, or if you're a Twitter user, right? I'm going to try and show you these. If I blew up my screen just a little bit right now, let me see if I can do this without freaking everything out too much, right? So this, and I could keep going and it would fill the screen. So this is slide number 1, right? It exists on Twitter. It's just a URL. You can see it at the top. Anybody can go there. Anybody can comment on it. Anybody can click on any of the links. But essentially, there's slide 1 or slide 2. There's slide 3, right? And I'm just kind of walking through slides, but they are hyper interactive and shareable and easy to kind of negotiate, right? So Twitter allows you to literally sort of create individual tweets that could be slides. And this is I forget what they're called, a Twitter event or a Twitter something where you can organize tweets and put them in order to do that. So those are things that you can do as a faculty or as a conference presenter. Let's look at student work, right? So what are some of the opportunities that exist for students? So I know in my work, because I love books, surrounded by books here in my living room, bookcases and shelves. I was an English teacher, right? So a huge chunk of my job, of course, was to get people to write and to read. So the writing often took, because I worked mostly with juniors and seniors, you know, there were essays, there was research, there was MLA, APA. I mean, it was that sort of world. My favorite classes, of course, as you've probably guessed, were the courses I was able to do that were in more like creative writing or journalism or things like that. But I'm very passionate about like making a thing that is like beautiful, right? Like it not only is informative maybe and serves that purpose, but it actually is looks nice, right? So when I think of the digital world and the digital display of student content, I'm like, well, the words can be there, and yes, some of these things you might find like not as helpful, but students can have the ability to craft their own vision of those words, right? They can add colors, or they can add fonts. I started teaching high school right at the time when you could change fonts easily on a document, and there was lots of them. So I spent an enormous amount of time telling people to just change it back to like a plain font that I could read. So you don't want distractions, and I'll show you a good example of that in a minute. But we do live in a time that students can do some pretty cool stuff, right? Like this is just Adobe Spark, right? Here's all the words she was asked to make. Here's a video she made, right? Here's some more words she was asked to write, prediction or a picture from somewhere else, right? But I mean, the essence of that assignment was to write a paper and tell us this information and your thoughts about it, but with not a lot of trickery. You can add it to, like Adobe Spark. This is a little more sophisticated, and maybe the barky robot dog is a little much, kind of like a weird font, but it does have like different links. It's a website, right? This was in Weebly, same idea, right? It's words, it's a video, right, that she made. This student had some serious kind of crafting capabilities, so she drew her own drawings for her presentation. So to me, as the person who both is oftentimes asked to share information in different spaces, and the person who has been asked at times to create, or has been the person in charge of asking students to create work, I'm pretty much interested in the ability to share it if they choose so, and to make it something that they feel proud of, right? I think that all of these things lean into that space a little bit. So lastly, so that we don't forget, because going back to here's the lecture for week 6, and it's a PowerPoint file, right? This is not that. You are the presentation. You are the person who is in charge of, you are the connectivity between the information and the student. And I think that I'm always just so joyful to work with faculty who are always so passionate about their work and their desire to share what they know with other people. And I get to see that all the time in a bunch of different ways. So this presentation is in Adobe Spark as well. It's here at the bottom of that URL. That's still like almost the last thing in the chat because nobody's asking questions. The whole 10-minute at the end of your presentation to ask for questions, I'll go ahead and do that now. I invite any of you to take a look at this site. There's all kinds of stuff on it. If you're not interested in what I have to say, I can tell you that the things I chose for the sidebar here, if you're a podcast fan, Terry Green's Getting Air podcast, the guy has like 100 amazing educators, people in the field of education talking about all kinds of things. It's just a beautiful piece of work. I put the conference tweets in here. And then below that is hybrid pedagogy. If you're Jesse Stommel and some others have created really a nice peer vetted place to share some really wonderful ideas. So that's some great reading there if you're more of a reader than a podcast person. And then Bonnie's teaching in higher ed stuff is, she literally does have 200 plus amazing educators. Okay, so let me answer a couple questions. We finally got some here. I always get pushback, absolutely. Yeah, always, right? It is never the majority of people. And I guess I don't feel like I'd be doing my job moving forward if I didn't expect some people to want to hold on to whatever they believe is right? Yeah, good for them, right? That's where they are. I've worked with, there Luddites in the world of education exist. I've worked with them, I've seen them, I've watched them, and they are some of my favorite people to work with. But yeah, I do get pushback from people. Policy, our institution's policy for having students use websites like Weebly. I think the policies and what actually ends up happening in class. I mean, I was a high school English teacher. I've closed my door and kind of done my work. And whilst that may not sound like the most law-abiding way of going about your work, honestly, that's how I worked, and I know pretty much every other faculty essentially did the same thing. Their ability to imagine and move past whatever policies have been in place and kind of the norms, who knows, right? I mean, I can tell you that had faculty paid attention a little earlier on to this digital landscape before the pandemic, we would have found ourselves in a much better place. And it's very possible that some of the institutional policies actually prevented that from happening. So yeah, our policies are, FERPA compliant, right? But I think I know from talking to faculty, there is a huge misunderstanding about what is FERPA, what FERPA is and what actually can happen in the classroom. So sometimes faculty, and not to the diss on the faculty, but I think sometimes they'll use that as a way, kind of an excuse not to do some other things. And while those other things may or may not work, they'll never know because they never went there. What do I recommend as a starting place for faculty? Honestly, WordPress, because something like 40% of the world's websites are built in WordPress these days, is a great place. But it doesn't have to be that, I mean, there are all kinds of other web editors out there. Looking into there is this idea out there called a domain of one's own, right? So the idea there is that you go to college as a freshman, they give you you pick your URL, my favorite website, best one on the planet.com, and you can put whatever you want there. It could be for classes, it could be your portfolio for one class, but not for another. It could be notes, it could be pictures of your trip to the zoo, it could be anything, right? But the idea is that they're giving you some space on the web that is yours to craft. And the web's like that. It wants to be that. It wants to be a place where you can have stuff, pull stuff in, like the RSS feeds on the presentation I just shared. Yeah, I mean, Google Sites is, there you go. Thanks, Tommy. That's a good one. What do you recommend for faculty? Google Sites is an amazing, super nice mobile friendly tool to share information. I have a faculty that has just created a couple liquid syllabus that are like websites that have all the syllabus information for her classes that she just puts a link to from Canvas, but just the organization, the aesthetic, and that it spans the course time, right? So when the course is over, it doesn't just disappear or you can't access it. And it's a great marketing tool too, right? Like you can send it to potential students. Yeah, Google Sites is a great one. Yes, we got 5 minutes left. Anna has sent me a secret message. Oh, she says I'm doing great, excellent, and I have 5 minutes left. Okay, any other questions? Anybody want to say anything? I haven't heard anybody except Anna say anything. That's it's okay.
If anyone wants to just speak their question or comment, you are able to unmute yourself now. So floor is still open.
Maybe that's why everybody was so quiet. Nobody could unmute themselves. Any other questions? So my information is out there for sure. That website, again, well, the presentation for today, which was about different ways to present information, is there. There's all, I mean, for me, like my portfolio, if you click on the portfolio link, I like my fancy portfolio. Yeah, so that's good. But then I have blog posts that are super brilliant and ridiculously foolish. Yeah, quick story. I don't often use PowerPoint. When I make it nonlinear, I jump around. Yep. Very good. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, the whole back and forward thing in clicking back, or whatever. I have nothing against a linear presentation. I'm like one of the most organized, simple people I know. I have like no emails in my inbox. I have just a list of super short things to do. And I'm very methodical that way. So I have zero qualms. I guess there are pieces of that puzzle, like the shareability, the interactiveness, the just the kind of the half-life sort of thing. Yeah, I'm not here to beat up on the amazing tool called PowerPoint at all. I just think that, in fact, I included one in this presentation, right? I used it as an example, one from 2008, right? So it's there, that does exist, but I wrapped some other things around that space. Okay, so let's see. Quiet time of the day. Good, yes, I know, right? Well, I hope everybody has a beautiful day today. And again, thank you so much for your work at this time and always, but particularly at this time. Be easy on your people, your family, your friends, yourself especially, and let's move on and have a great day. Session evaluation. Hi, Ron. I'm super excited to go have lunch with you. Cool. I'll tell you this whole story over again if you want to hear it, right? Okay, my info is out there all over the place. If you got questions or ever want to learn more, let me know. And we're 1 minute short of time. Anna, it's all yours.
Yes, thank you so much for the great presentation, Todd. And thank you so much for attending and participating. I know that sometimes, you know, even I have a lot of my quiet moments and it's like, no, I just want to listen. So we appreciate everyone for being here and participating in this conference. Thank you, Todd, for sharing your knowledge and experience. And we will see you in other sessions, hopefully. Thanks.
Thanks, Anna.
Bye. Awesome job. Hey, Lou, how are you? Good to see you. You still there?